Let's start. Good morning or good evening to all, and welcome to the Data-Driven Community virtual meeting. A few words about the Data-Driven Community. If you will go to the community website, then you can notice on the right upper corner, the bottom that say call for speaker. The call for speaker is closed. We are already started to select the best sessions. I can tell you that we have hundreds of sessions. Actually, I can give you the numbers exactly. We have 300, okay, I don't remember exactly the number, but it's more than 305 sessions that were submitted. We need to filter those and select the best for the Future Data-Driven Summit 2025. Once the session will be selected, then we will present them in the website. You can go to the conference page, and you can use the link that you see here. I will also add it in the chat during the meeting today, and you can register. The early registration to the summit is already open. If you will scroll down a bit, the main page of the community website, then you can see on the left side the information about the upcoming Future Data-Driven Summit. And on the right side, you can see the weekly meetings like today, the user group meeting. You are more than welcome to contact me and anyone of the community board. Jen Joseph is the founder and the co-administrator of the community. He will also lead the Future Data-Driven Summit 2025 this year. Anna Weekly and Defty Gugori are moderators and event organizer. And myself, my name is Ronen Arieli. I'm from Israel, working as a senior consulting in the field of data platform and architecture of enterprise-level system. I'm the co-administrator of the data-driven community, and I will be hosting the session today. So together we are here to help and serve the data platform community. Feel free to contact us. During the meeting today, please use the chat for questions and discussions as well. This is not a conference. This is a user group meeting. It's more flexible. We speak about the community and we want the community to participate. So feel free to use the chat. More than this, you can also use the reactions. I like it a lot. It gives a lot of fun. If you hear something that you like, if you want to clap hands virtually, of course, feel free to use it. It does not interfere in the course of the meeting. It just goes in the screen and everyone can see a small icon. I'm honored to introduce our guest speaker today, Dominick Raimato. And Dominick, I think that it's best that you will take the control from here and add a few words about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me pull up my deck here. Sure, it's coming up. And everything's showing?
Yeah, I can see your screen.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate being invited here to join this community, Cloud Data-Driven User Group. This is fantastic. Love getting out into the community and sharing a little bit here. And today, we're going to talk a little bit about a specific use case that I was solving with Copilot specifically, but how we were able to use Microsoft Fabric to really create this end-to-end solution to be able to capture this data, to be able to use it and able to get in there and get things going. I saw somebody there saying that they cannot see the presentation, so let me stop presenting here. Let me try re-presenting just really quick one more time, make sure it's there.
Okay, we have someone in the chat that said that he cannot see you. I can see you, so it will be great if someone can confirm that he can see the speaker or he cannot as well. If it's an issue with a specific person, so please just log out and log in. Okay, we have a confirmation that you can see the speaker, so everything is okay.
Okay,
Let's continue.
perfect. All right. So, um, so I'll do a quick introduction about myself. So my name is Dominick Raimato. I am based out of the northeast of the United States. So actually, I live close to Jean. I think we're only a couple miles away from each other, actually, where we live. So really excited to be here and share a little bit. I like to consider myself as a professional troublemaker. Not necessarily that I love to sow chaos, but what I like to do is I like to find creative solutions to challenges that are out there, and work through issues and blockers and find ways around them. And this is a great example. This talk here is a great example of how I was able to do that. I'm very active in the community, so if you would like to connect with me, you can go connect with me on LinkedIn. You can send me an email. I know quite often events like this, you go and you learn something, it's really cool and it's really exciting. But then when you're all said and done, you still have some questions or you think about things later. So if you have any additional questions, thoughts, concerns, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm generally pretty good at responding. Sometimes it takes a day or two to get responses, but I do actively respond to people. So please do connect with me. We will be doing a lot with Power Query for sure with all of this here too. And it just so happens that I wrote a book on Power Query. There's lots of really good ones out there. But I think it's a fair thing when you can say, when you write something, you can say something that's going on. You get to share about it. So with that in mind, let's kind of dig in here. Oh,
I'm sorry to stop you, but there is an issue with more than one person. So let's try to fix it. We have the time. Two people saying that they cannot see the display. You can use your microphone, please, and explain. Can you see the speaker, the camera? One second, they're writing. So one of them is writing. We can see the speaker. Okay, so they can see the camera. They cannot see the display.
so let's try one more thing because I was using PowerPoint Live, but maybe I just need to share my screen.
Exactly. Let's try it like this. Okay, I can see everything good now. I saw it before as well. Okay, now I get that it's good. Can the other person say that it's good for him as well? Also, everyone see. So if you want, you can go back and start. Everyone confirm that they can see now the screen.
Okay, perfect. So, so just kind of to backtrack there for a second there, but we'll hit essentially, I've got my email address, I've got my LinkedIn profile there, so you can connect with me. So if you want to be able to connect with me and ask questions afterwards, please feel free to do so. Um, I think I am the Dominick Raimato that's out there on LinkedIn, so I am pretty easy to find. I am active in the training community. I don't train like I used to, but I still maintain my Microsoft certified trainer. And I just am a fairly recently minted Microsoft MVP around the data platform. So I'm big about community, love being able to share, and it's exciting to be here to talk a little bit about that. So with that in mind, let's dig in a little bit and talk about what we're going to really focus in on here today. And let's make sure this is working. Okay, there we go. So what we're going to do here is we're going to run through a couple of things. And the first thing we're going to make sure we talk about is we're going to dig in a little bit to Microsoft Graph. And we're going to get a little bit of an understanding of what's going on there and some of the challenges we have to consider when we're looking at using Microsoft Graph with Microsoft Fabric. So how we're going to go connect to that data, pull that information in, and put it into a lakehouse essentially inside of our Fabric environment. So what we're going to do is we'll make sure we have an understanding of what has to happen and what that roadmap's going to look like. And then we're going to work through that together. So we're going to go prepare that lakehouse. We're going to go and build that connection with our data flows and get that data pulled in and pushed into our lakehouse. And then we're going to go ahead and deploy a reporting solution that will allow us to be able to view this content and start to make some decisions and insights around it. So that's really where we're headed here today. So let's talk a little bit about Microsoft Graph, because I think that this is a tool that people know about, but they don't really understand or they haven't really used it before. So Microsoft Graph is a fantastic endpoint series of endpoints and APIs for Microsoft services. So some of them are really basic, some of them are very complex. But these are endpoints that are used frequently to be able to create custom solutions that people are building. So anytime somebody is creating a custom app or a custom website that taps into Microsoft services, they're probably using the Microsoft Graph APIs to do so. And there's some rich data that's available to us in these endpoints. Think about everything that's in Microsoft 365 today. There's so much data out there that we can get to. Using Microsoft Graph, that allows us to be able to view this content, be able to pull this data, and be able to make some better insights and some decisions and things of that nature around that. It does a great job of integrating different solutions together. So, for example, if you have a custom project management tool and you want to be able to push things to a planner board, you would use Graph to provide that integration back and forth. One of the things I really like about Microsoft Graph is that sometimes it can be used, especially with a reporting solution, to help with security and compliance. For example, I worked with a customer a year or two ago that had some really weird rules around their proxy and when a proxy would be available for updating machines. So what we had to do is we had to be able to figure out which devices were not compliant and then find out which ones were actually active based off of their last login. So using some graph endpoints, we were able to pull information about the devices and login information and then be able to say, hey, out of 1,000 devices, what are the 100 devices that have been logged in the last 2 weeks? Because those are the ones that I want to go address first. The other ones we can figure out what's going on with later, but I want to look at the ones that are active today in my network that are not compliant and go address those things as quickly as possible. So it's really important to be able to do those kinds of things. So lots of really great use cases here. But one of the things I really like here with the Graph API is that there's a lot of opportunities to do some level of reporting and analytics around utilization. And Copilot was one of those really great opportunities when it came to providing rich data that would allow us to make better decisions around how well users are adopting Copilot and maybe make decisions on where we should go next with Copilot. So utilization reports from Graph are not new. They've been available. And here's an example here. I've got a demo tenant with Microsoft Teams data. And you can see, I can see some user activity report. And even if you go down a little bit further in the bottom, you can, I've blurred it out for that purpose, but you can see usernames and how many messages they maybe have sent or anything like that. So we can get some pretty basic data out of our admin center, which is nice. That's been available to us. It's been there for years. And it's not just to Microsoft Teams, but there's multiple endpoints available across different parts of the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. So, for example, our reporting endpoints that are available to us from Graph for Microsoft Teams, not only are we looking at user activity, but we can look at individual team utilization, so which teams are in use or what devices are being used to connect to Microsoft Teams. We could do the same thing with OneDrive around activity or usage. SharePoint, same thing. We can look at sites, which ones are active, which ones maybe aren't as active anymore. We can look at Viva Engage. If anyone is still a fan of Viva Engage, formerly known as Yammer, we can actually see who's engaging. One of my favorite things is that there's companies that tell me that, hey, people aren't using Yammer or Viva Engage, but the data actually tells you otherwise. There's posts, but people are reading them in Viva Engage, which is interesting. Outlook has some reporting that's available to us as well, allowing us to see what activity is happening. But most importantly, we have Copilot because that's the newest tool here. And what I like about this endpoint is it's going to allow us to be able to look at some things around adoption, not only with Copilot, but really across all these applications. And we can start to understand which organizations are using which tools and how well they're using them. But there is a catch when it comes to the Graph API. There are some headwinds that we have to consider when it comes to collecting this data. And the first one is the availability of the data. So when we look at the data when it comes in, it's looking at the days on UTC time. So it has to find somewhere for global companies. This can kind of be a little bit of a funky thing, but the idea essentially here is that we have snapshots that are taken on specific days, so we have to look at those things, and that timing doesn't always work out. So, for example, we're looking at today, June 12th. And if I go back and I look at my historical data, I might not have data available to me from yesterday, June 11th. Actually, I might not even have for the 10th, the 9th, or even the 8th. That availability cycle varies sometimes. So I could do a refresh tomorrow. Let's say I've got data up until the 9th, and we're going to find out here in a moment. When I do my refresh tomorrow, I might have data to the 10th. I might still only have data through the 9th, or I might get data to the 11th. So that availability and inconsistency can be really challenging. The other challenge we run into is that some of our endpoints require paging. So, for example, the user's endpoint has paging, the teams or groups list has paging. So, we have to sometimes work through some things and think through with our APIs how we want to structure them. And that sometimes could require some custom coding. So, if you're really great with Power Query from like the clicking and the graphical interface, that'll get you somewhere down the line. But if you want to do some paging, you might have to crack open the advanced editor and do some custom coding. And then, like I said, the inconsistency of the data can be really challenging. So one of the things you might see is that Teams data is available through June 10th, whereas OneDrive might be only through the 9th, Copilot might be available through the 11th. And then even too, how that data is being collected is different. And you're going to see why here in a moment, because the way Copilot data is being represented is very different than how the data is being represented for the other applications like Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, and Viva Engage. So let's talk about how we're going to architect this solution, because we need to be able to take our Graph API data and we need to be able to bridge it to a Power BI report at the end of the day, because we want to be able to consume this data. So how am I going to get these pieces to come across and access each other? So the biggest thing here is that to bridge these pieces together, we're going to have a lakehouse in the center, and that's going to be our repository for all of our data. That's going to be the central location. So in order to get our lakehouse prepped, we're actually going to use a Fabric notebook to go build our tables out and build our schema. This is to make our lives just a little bit easier and provide some consistency. One of the things I should note here, with all of this stuff that we're going through today, I actually have this exercise available for you. So you're actually going to be able to use a sample file, and you can actually deploy this report on your own within it takes about an hour to get done, I say, from beginning to end. But the idea here is that we're going to build these tables with this specific schema, so that way we can use it a report template to be able to make our lives a little easier. Now, once we've got our lakehouse, we will use a semantic model to bring everything together, build our relationships, and serve up the data into our Power BI report. But I still have to get all of my data from the Graph API into the lakehouse. And that's where we're going to use a Gen 2 data flow specifically to do this. Why a Gen 2 versus a Gen 1? Well, the Gen 2 data flow will allow us to connect the data into the lakehouse and allow us to append or even replace some of the data depending on what we're doing and with our operation, and get it into the warehouse. So we want to make sure that that is really key and ready to go. So how are we going to make this data flow through our data flow? So one of the things we're going to do is we're actually going to use a service principal to do this. So I've already got a service principal deployed, and it's going to be using the user read endpoint, the user read all endpoint, and the reports read all endpoint. And that data is going to allow us to be able to go and pull all that information and see what users are available. And it's also going to pull all of our reporting data. So we already have that there, and we're going to connect using an OAuth 2 query for the token. The other reason why we're using this specifically, because I get a lot of questions about this, is there's two challenges that we have to think about. Number one, the biggest challenge that you run into when it comes to authentication for these Graph API endpoints is that if you need admin access to get this data, you're going to have to keep PIMing up sometimes, right? Yeah, if your organization requires your admin account that you just have to use privileged identity management, your refresh is going to break because you have to PIM up every day before the refresh happens, and that's going to be a problem. For some other people, your refresh cycles, password reset cycles, things like that, things can cause the refresh to break. So an OAuth 2 query, being able to use a service principal and use a client secret could allow you to have a little bit more of a stable refresh. Also, because it's in a data flow, you would have to have access to the data flow to be able to go see some of the information. So as opposed to in your semantic models, if you use this, where the token would be a little bit more exposed, or a little bit more risk, there's a little bit more protection here with the Gen 2 data flow. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and call that service principal out of Entra ID. And with that, it's going to bring back a token, a bearer token. And that's what we're going to send over to our Graph API. So once we've got that token, we'll pass that over. And then our Graph API is going to return some data back. Then we're going to do some transformation of that graph data. We're going to make some adjustments. We're going to make sure the formatting is the way it is. We're going to remove some columns. We're going to add some things. And then what we're going to do is we're going to connect that to our storage location, and we're going to push that out into our lakehouse. And for our users, we're going to go and replace that every time. But for our graph data, we're going to append that data, because the data, the way we're pulling our data, we're going to want to do snapshots, and we want to capture that data and warehouse that data every time we do a snapshot. So you'll see how that works through as we go through the data flow. So with that, I personally like to really live dangerously. So we're going to do a live demo here of all of this in action. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here for a second. Give me 1 second. Let me switch context here. All right. And just give me, can I get a thumbs up that everyone can see my Power BI screen here inside of Fabric? All right, get some thumbs up. Perfect. All righty. So I've got my Power BI workspace, and it's a blank canvas. So what we're going to do, like I said, is we need to get prepped for our storage first and foremost, because we want to make sure we have a landing space for all of our data to come in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a new item, and I'm going to go ahead and create a lake house. So I like to just search for things. It makes it a lot easier to go find this. I could scroll down the list, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new lake house. And I usually like to do a little prefix there with the initials of what I'm creating. So I'm going to do lakehouse, or LH underscore, and I'm going to call this Copilot data. I'm going to click create. And it'll take a second here. What it's going to do is it's going to go ahead and deploy that lakehouse for me. And you'll see here that there are no tables available. There's no files. It's brand new, blank slate here for us to start to use. Perfect. No issues there. So once I've done that, I want to go ahead and create some tables. Once again, because I have a template, I want to create the schema and the tables the way I want them done. So that way we don't run into any issues or any collisions, just to make life easier. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to go ahead and import a notebook that I've already created. So this is available in my Git repo. I've got the article and the blog post that walks you through all these pieces. So you'll get that at the end. But I've got my my notebook, and I'm going to go ahead and upload it. And when I open it up here, you'll see that there's a couple of different things going on here. And primarily, it's all about creation at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and fire off the run all. So it's going to run through all the cells. But each cell essentially is creating a different table in our lakehouse. So oops, I'm actually going to cancel that. Hold on. I forgot to, because this is actually using another lakehouse. I want to make sure I'm using the right one. Let me connect to an existing one, make sure I'm using the right one here. If I don't, it's going to give me a bunch of errors telling me that I'm connected to the wrong, or I'm connected to a lakehouse that already has these tables, so I don't want to run into that. All right, sorry. Now I've got that swapped out, so I'm connected to my lakehouse that's in my workspace. Everything's good there. And now I can go ahead and click run. So it's going to fire up the notebook session and start this process. So you'll see here, I'm using PySpark, and I'm going and creating my table. So for each field, I'm essentially giving it a name, I'm giving it a data type, and specifying that out. One of the things that you'll see here, for some people, they really freak out when it comes to Power BI, because there's a lot of opinions around, should I use underscores instead of spaces for field names? The reason why I'm using underscores is that while I am using capital letters for each of these individual words to help it really easy to see, for whatever reason, even though I'm using it here, it's not going to show up that way when I go to use it in other places. It's actually going to show everything in lowercase. So I'm using this to make it easier for people to be able to see. It's a little bit more accessible and easier to consume from a developer standpoint. So while yes, I am team no underscores, I had to become team underscore just to make it easier to read and understand and comprehend as I was working through the data. So I've gone through, I've declared all my columns and the type, then loaded that into my data frame, and I write that in there and essentially create that table, and I'm doing it in the Delta format. So my first table here that I'm creating is the team's user activity, but I keep going through. I do OneDrive, I've got SharePoint, Viva Engage, and then I do two different ones for Copilot, one for core data, one for last activity, and you'll see why here a little bit. Then the next thing I do is I create a table for our graph users because we're going to use our users table to do a little bit of dimensional filtering on our data. And then we're going to add a date table in, so that way we can do some comparisons and things of that nature. We'll also add in some licensing data, so that way we can filter on licenses. For some organizations, we maybe want to be able to filter by who's using an enterprise license versus a frontline license, right? So, or who's using, who already has Copilot that today we can filter on that license. And then lastly, I'm putting in a table here that's going to allow me to look at collaboration levels. And this is something that we've created, and I'll talk about here in a moment as we go to look at this, because the idea essentially is that if you're a really good user of Microsoft 365, I would expect you to be a potentially really great user of Copilot because you're using diverse elements of the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. But if you are not using a Microsoft 365 well, how would I expect you to be using Copilot well? So that just gives us a little bit of a bucket to be able to say, are you an individual collaborator? Are you a team collaborator? Or are you an influencer really driving people to collaborate? And with all that in place here, you'll notice here, I didn't have any tables at first, but when I hit refresh, you'll see that my tables are now showing up. And if I go back to my Lakehouse view and hit refresh, my tables are showing up. So all my data is starting, or I've got my tables ready to accept data. There's nothing in there obviously yet, but we're ready to go. So everything has been set here, at least from a data perspective, to start to pull everything in. The next step that I need to go through is that I need to actually ingest this data into my Lakehouse. And I'm going to do that with a data flow. So I'll go into new item here and I'll search for data flow. And you'll see here, it shows up in a couple different spots, right? So number one, I've got the Gen 1, Gen 2. So remember, it's always Gen 2 because I need to be able to put data into my Lakehouse. The other thing here that we want to make sure is that even though it's showing up twice here, they're the exact same thing. They've just grouped them in two different spaces. One is for getting data and one's for preparing data. Remember, data flows allows not only grab data, but also to transform that data. So either one of these is fine as long as you pick the Gen 2 data flow. And we'll go ahead and give it a name. And we'll, once again, give it a little prefix. We'll go ahead and click create. And from here, what we could do is we can do anything we want. We could connect to different data sources that are available, text, things like that. But what I'm going to do, instead of having to do all this by hand, I actually have a Power Query template for you to kind of accelerate. This is really a great starting point for anyone that is looking to use Microsoft Graph Data, but maybe doesn't want to go through the complexity of having to write all that code by hand or go find it. So what I can do is I can go ahead and import my Power Query template. Once again, also available on my Git repo. And you'll see here that I've got my query parameters. And what I'll be able to do is pass information in on my different application ID, the secret, and then also the tenant GUID. And when I do that, all this data will start to flood into this Power Query template. Now, because one, I don't want to share my application secret because it is mine. But two, because there are some pieces there, want to kind of accelerate this because we only have about an hour-ish together today to go through all this. I already have that pre-baked here in this view inside of Power BI. So I'm going to jump into my data flow. And you'll note that I actually do have my parameters. You can see that there is some data in there already available, which is fantastic. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and take a look at how I really get to what I'm doing. So the first step to getting everything set up is, if you remember, we had to go grab our uh, OAuth 2 token. And we're doing that with a parameter. Parameters are very versatile inside of Power Query, and I feel like people don't take advantage of them because they're really great for repeatable tasks that we need to be able to do. A lot of people use them for transformation, but one of the greatest things that we could do is actually leverage this to pull things like a token that we can use in our query. So what I've done here, I've got some code. I'm going to go ahead and open up my advanced editor here for a second. And let me zoom in there so everyone can actually see it. But you'll see it's actually two functions. There's a function here. We can see that because I've got the parentheses and the little equal sign and greater than sign. That's telling me that it started. But that's going to essentially pull, or I'm sorry, no, it's not a function. That's going to allow us to give me the function to be able to pull my data. From there, what we're going to do is we're going to go and log in, and you'll see that I'm calling a web API, and I'm just pulling in a login that string that uses my GUID for my tenant. And then what I'm doing here is I'm actually passing content information, and I am pulling in that client ID and that client secret or application secret that we have. Those three parameters here are showing up. There's a couple things I want to note here is, number one, we've been able to put all that information in, so it makes it really easy to update in the future. So I don't have to go break into the advanced editor in the future. I can teach anyone how to update a parameter. I don't want necessarily everyone touching my code. But number two, the thing I really like about this whole thing is that we're actually using a post method for our web API here. We're not using get, we're using post. So able to just add a little bit of content here into the message body. And now we're going ahead and pulling this. The one thing I will note too here is that with this scope, I'm right now pointing to the graph.microsoft.com for endpoints. But you can update this for different things. There's a security one. There's one for Power BI if you want to go pull the Power BI API endpoints. So there's different ones that you can use to go grab this information and make it friendly for what you're doing. And then when it's all said and done, it brings back an access token for me. And if I go ahead and invoke this, you'll see here it actually brings back a token. And there we go. And this token will expire. So if you screenshot it and you're crazy enough to type this in all by hand or figure out how to pull it out, the token will expire here very shortly anyway. So I'll go ahead and I can go ahead and delete that and get rid of it. But we're going to use that function as our primary way to authenticate as we go through with our query. I'm going to pause there because sometimes we get some questions. I know somebody's been monitoring the chat. I haven't had a chance to really look at it here, so I'm going to pull it up. But are there any questions that I might have missed on this?
There are no question in the chat, but everyone are welcome to ask questions. Oh, now is this set available in GitHub to refer using our tenant? So before you answer, because the answer is probably yes, I will tell everyone that we usually upload or ask the speaker to upload the session material. Once I will share the recording in the comment, we will also share the link to any session material that the speaker will provide. So Dominic, the question is for you. I just gave a general question.
Yeah. So absolutely. So I have a blog post link at the end of this that actually will walk you through. It's a three-part series that'll walk you through step by step all the pieces, and has links to my GitHub, repository with all this with the notebook, with the Power Query template, with the sample template for Power BI. So all this is available for you to use today. So we'll make sure that you have that link when it's all said and done. And yes, make sure it's uploaded so that way it's available for everyone. So no, great question.
The best option is, as I mentioned, once I will share the recording, just add the comment. I will share it on LinkedIn and Facebook. And on LinkedIn, you obviously have an account. If you have on Facebook as well, then you can do it yourself. Just add a comment with all the extra information. Okay?
Yep, absolutely. All right. Perfect. So we've got our ability to authenticate. So the next step here is what we're going to do is we're going to get our graph users. So this is going to pull out of Entra ID as well. And you can see we've got some information here about our users. We've got some emails, we've got locations, names, you know, unfortunately in this demo template, we don't have any company names, departments, employee types, manager names, you know, things of that nature. But the idea essentially is we want to be able to pull information that's really key because that could really help us make some decisions, right? You know, like who's their job titles and stuff like that could really help us make some heads or tails of our data. So we're going to get that information, and this is my function inside of a function. So if you remember what I was saying before, is that we have to sometimes deal with some paging. So I'm doing a very similar thing here where I'm actually going and pulling against an endpoint. You'll see here I'm actually going and pulling the user's endpoint. But there's a couple of things that I'm doing differently here as well. Number one is that I'm adding in um, a header that's allowing me to pull that token, and I've already passed the token in as part of the function up front. So I've got that. The other thing here that I have is that I have this relative path. And what you're seeing here is that I'm actually doing some paging. So what I'm doing here is I've selected specific fields I want to see. And then what I've done is I've also expanded the manager endpoint so that way I can pull the manager all in one query. And then I've restricted the number of, or I've set the number of users I want to pull back to 900. So I can only pull so many users back at one time. So I actually set it for 900. I think you can set up to 1,000 is the limit for the paging. But what it's going to do is it's going to bring us back a paging token. And that's going to change what we can, or it's going to force us to use paging to get through this. Now, sometimes you get lucky and you say, hey, here's how many records divided by the number of records I can pull per page, and then just do a page number and just skip on the pages. However, Microsoft doesn't do it that way. They instead give you this OData next link. So we're using the try function inside of Power Query to go and look and say, hey, does this next link show up? Because if it does, I want you to actually pull this query and just do it again and keep running through. Otherwise, exit out of the loop, and then we just pull back that data and essentially result in the user details. So it's a little bit more of a complex code, but the idea here is that any function that any endpoint that you're using that requires the next link, this is the code that you need to use. You just need to update a couple of the little pieces like the endpoint that you're looking at, and you can rename the sub function that's inside of this query as well that makes sense for what you're doing. So this is a great thing that even if you don't want to do anything on users, this is something you maybe want to be able to use again in the future for other things. So just keep this piece of code handy because it will be helpful. So we've gone through and we've done that, and as a result, we have our users. No problems there. Our date table is pretty simple here. Oh, I'm sorry. And to do that, I just simply went ahead and I say grab and get a user token, and then essentially said, hey, let's pull that value and throw it against our get users function that I have here. And as a result, it brings in all of our users. So pretty easy. So now that I've got that date table, I just started this in 2024 because that's really when Copilot started. The API endpoint was not really available at the beginning of 2024, but I thought it was an easy way, but it allows us to be able to go do some analysis and understand things there. And then I also pulled some licensing data. For these three tables, I'm looking at this information and I want to be able to put it into my lakehouse. And when I do, I want to make sure that I'm putting it in and updating it. So down here in the bottom right-hand corner, we can go to the destination. I've already got ported to my lakehouse. But what I've done here is I go ahead and connect. I'm going to use my existing table that I have already because I've already created this, my licensing data table. And when I go there, you'll see that I'm setting it up to replace. And I'm just simply mapping. I'm taking my user principal name column to my user principal name column in the destination, assign products just the same way. And I'm replacing my data. Why? Because I don't really care what your old licensing was. I care about what your new licensing is because that's really what's current. Users come into the organization, users leave the organization. New licensing comes into the organization, licensing leaves the organization. And I don't really need to wear the house that. So I'm going to go ahead and replace that. So I'm doing that every time for my user principal name. I'm doing the same thing for my date table, and I'm doing the same thing for my graph users table. So all of them are mapping to their individual tables and being put in there for use. For my graph user data, or sorry, for my application specific user data, things are a little bit different here. So a couple of things that I think is interesting here when we look at this data is number one, the way the query works. So you'll see here that I'm actually pulling data back for the last 30 days. That's a really key point here. I'm only able to look at data for 30 days. So we want to make sure that we're capturing that and addressing that as we go along. That 30 days, because of that, we're going to actually have to append this data because I can't do anything more and I'm aggregating it. The other thing that I've done here is when you get towards the end of this, is you can see that I've added a couple of columns here to help me out with some of my scoring. So for example, I added some true false columns here, make life a little easier. I also added scores, and these are actually adding into my collaboration score at the end of the day. Remember, like I said, I want to see people using diverse parts of the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. So I'm putting that together into a collab score. And I've done that for Teams, OneDrive, and SharePoint, and even Viva Engage. All those things are available to us so that way we can kind of see how people are using the tools. Then the last section here that I think is really important here to note is Copilot data. Well, this is kind of interesting. All the other endpoints gave me counts of activity, but for Copilot, for some reason, they did not give me that. They instead give me the last activity date. That's pretty frustrating if you're me, isn't it? So you can see here that we've actually got some holes in our data and all that stuff. So I've done a couple of things to make my life easier. This table is just being used to pull this data in. And then what I did was I actually did a reference. I right-clicked here and said, reference this data to create a new query called Copilot data. And what I did here was I just simply took that data and I pivoted it so I can look at the different applications individually and their last activity. So just kind of twisted a little bit and made it into its own little fact table. And then I'm doing something similar with Copilot last activity because I'm same concept here. Want to be able to look at last activity date. I'm looking at the dates here, but I'm also labeling their activities. So I'm starting to be able to look at things because I can only look at things at a date perspective. And once again, also too, because I don't always know what the consistency of my pool is going to be, I'm just going to look at everything on a weekly basis and say, hey, based off the date of this pool, did they use Copilot within the last 7 days? If they did, I'll say that it was used this week. If they haven't used it for up to 14 days, we'll say um, not sorry, used last week. And then if they've used it somewhere in the past, but not in the last 14 days, we say not used recently, or we would identify anyone that has never used it and shame them for not using Copilot, because why would you not use Copilot? So the idea here essentially is to be able to pull this information in and make it really easy to consume. And what we'll do here for all these graph reports that we're pulling in, we're going to go ahead to our lakehouse once again. We're still going to connect to our existing table, but now we're going to append this data instead. Oops. It should have, has it not? Existing table. does exist. Oh, interesting. Uh, It's weird that it's not actually letting me set that. But the idea here is that instead of doing the replace, we're going to append. So the idea here essentially is this data, we're going to look at essentially the last snapshots that are available on a weekly basis, and we're going to append this to the data model. So that way we can track it. The other thing I want to note here is take a look at this report refresh date. Today is June 12th. The last available data for Copilot was on June 7th. That's quite a number of days that have passed. Yikes. If I go back to Microsoft Teams, you'll see that it's actually 6/8. OneDrive is 8, SharePoint. Okay. So it looks like the other applications, it is June 8th, but Copilot specifically is June 7th. So just kind of highlighting here, these are some of the challenges that we have with the graph data that's coming in. These are some of the inconsistencies that we're fighting against. And that's why we just kind of want to look at things on a weekly basis. It is not a perfect science, but it allows us to kind of give us a little bit more of an apples to apples comparison as opposed to these dates being out of sync. And once I've got everything set, I can go ahead and publish, make sure everything's set. I can also use this publish later if I so choose, if I don't want to go ahead and publish it right away, but we'll go ahead and do that. And what's going to happen here is two things are going to happen to start. The first thing is it's actually going to go and validate my data flow. So that's going to start to spin right here. And then once that has been validated, it's actually going to fire off a refresh of the data. So we're going to go ahead and let it validate, and we're going to let that refresh run. While that's happening, I'm going to, because I don't want to sit here and just watch a data flow refresh, we're going to jump over to our SQL Analytics endpoint for our Lakehouse, because there's a couple things we still need to do as well. So one thing that we need to do with our model is we need to make sure that we've added our tables so that they can be used. So the one thing that's really important here, because I'm just going to use the default model, but I want to manage the default semantic model, and I want to make sure I've actually selected my tables here and that they're included. I don't want to collect everything because it brings me some additional insight items, which, these are nice, but like I don't really need those in my semantic model. They're kind of cluttering things. And especially if I want to start to use artificial intelligence with Copilot and some Gen AI, I just want to keep my model as clean as possible. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull this information in. So select these tables and make sure that they're available. I will tell you that you will do it once in your life or you forget to select your tables and you'll keep connecting and wondering why your data doesn't show up. It's because you forgot to add in your tables to your semantic model. The next thing I want to make sure that I do is I want to make sure that I actually have our relationships set up with our model layouts. So you'll see here in my model layout, I've got all my data connected here. So I've got a couple of things that are going on. So really my dimensional tables here, let me zoom out for a moment. My dimensional tables are going to be my graph users data, my date table, and my licensing data. And then everything else really sits in a fact table orientation. So I've got my dimensions here on the left-hand side. I've got all my fact tables here on the right. And then I've got this collaboration table, collaboration levels table. It's not connected to anything, but that's because I'm doing a little bit of special manipulation. That's just a little display table that I'm using for something else. So I've got everything kind of connected in here. You'll notice that I've got a many-to-one relationship from licensing data to graph users with bidirectional filter. That's because you could have multiple licenses assigned to your users. So it's not ideal, but once again, how we want to be able to filter out this data and make our dimensional model work. But we have all the pieces connected here. Now we've got that all set. We can go back here, make sure that the refresh completed. Oh, it did. 12:51 p.m. It is 12:52 p.m. where I'm at right now. So we know that it worked. And we can actually even go back here and just maybe do a little quick SQL query to make sure everything shows up. So select all from Copilot data, or actually we'll do Copilot last activity. Order by last activity date, descending. We'll hit run. And look at that. We've got our data coming in. Perfect. That's exciting. I know my query is working and I know my refresh is working because I have data from June 7th. Fantastic. Okay. So at this point, I've created the storage location, got the schema all in place. I use a data flow, just go and connect to my endpoints, use that OAuth 2 function to go grab the token, using that token to pass through for all my different endpoints, and then continuing to just pull my data in. And as a result, I've been able to pull that all into my lakehouse, do some modeling, and now I'm ready to actually do some reporting. So, how do I go down to that next route? Well, it just so happens I have my report available. So that is pulling up in the background here. By the way, I don't know if anyone has noticed, but there is a new splash screen when you go to open up Power BI. It's actually kind of nice. It's kind of walking through your old the legacy logos there. So it's always been exciting to kind of see how Power BI has evolved over the years. It is pretty exciting to me. So give it a second here. Sorry, I had this open and closed on me apparently. All right, there we go. Reshare this. All right. So we can see we've got our data starting to come in here. Let me actually, so you'll know here my model is, or sorry, my data is coming in from that model. If I actually go look at the model view, you'll see all the model is the same. So that's all what we would expect. Everything is really great here. And what we're doing here essentially is we're in that direct lake mode. So as data is coming into the lake house, it's automatically updating for us. So now I've got my data coming in for my different data sources, and now we can start to see, oh, here's my activity over the last week with Copilot, and we can see what breakdown is happening here. We see utilization of users over time. We can see app trends and things of that nature. So it allows us to be able to really get into the weeds and understand a little bit better what's going on with Copilot. The other thing I like here is that I've got my collaboration score. So I can go and look at my list of users and I can see who the best collaborators are. I don't have any departments, but it allows me to rank and rate departments across the organization to identify who might be the best users of Copilot as a team based off of their collaboration score. Now, this is a training tenant, so you get different kind of utilization from each for week over week. So you get different things going on. But the idea essentially is that you have people interacting with this content and being able to leverage this to be able to make decisions around who maybe are really great users. You can also see who's currently active with Copilot. And then we can also even see who is inactive or who maybe has never used Copilot, and I want to go pull licenses from those people and give them out to other people. And then I've got other analysis available to us. But the idea here essentially is that now I've got something that's really easy to customize that I can make adjustments to, and I can start to use to drive my adoption of Copilot. And I think that that's really what's key here at the end of the day is for a lot of users is that people want to be able to drive utilization. They want to be able to drive adoption. And these are tools that are available to us today that make life really easy. I can tell you 2 years ago, or even just a year ago, without Fabric and really some of the features and functionality we have, I would have to get a database administrator to help me out here. They would have to do the whole ETL job with Azure Data Factory, put it into a SQL server for me so I could do my analysis and things of that nature. And for me, that's not a problem because I could probably do that on my own as a data person. But if I'm an adoption person or I'm an organization that's trying to create something that could be redeployed to our customers really easily, this is a fantastic win because now I don't have to worry about does the person I work with have access to things like Azure and have the ability or the skill set to do ETL pipelines around APIs or anything like that. I'm now making something that's really easily redistributed and it's really easy to consume. So these are just some things that I think about when I'm looking at solutions that I'm scaling out for whether it's with the customers or things that I'm trying to put out into the community like this, is how do I make it really easy for people to do on their own and make it really consumable for them. One thing I will note is that with all these things that we put in here, it's really great. But when you have this in place, you might need to update the data source. And that is a really key piece here. So where did it go? Let's actually flip this down. There we go. So when we go to transform data, data source settings here, you can see I can actually flip it to any of my different lake houses that I have here. I've got a couple of them for Copilot reports or semantic models. So it allows me to be able to just quickly switch between them as I need to pull the data into the report that I want. So really easy for me to be able to swap that out and use it for what is important to me. All right. So I've kind of gone through a whole lot of these pieces. Let's jump back over to the slides here because there are some challenges I want to be able to highlight and get you some resources. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour. I think this goes a little bit beyond that, which is great. And I can hang out for a little bit for some questions, but let's talk really quick about some challenges that are out there. So I've already talked a little bit about some of the big ones that I see is data availability is always a challenge, making sure that it's consistent. We saw the date mismatch. You couldn't have planned it better actually to be able to see that. So I was really excited to see that show up. Paging requirements is always a challenge. So let's just keep that in mind too, is when we look at paging when it comes to data, we want to make sure that we're not running into any or we want to be able to resolve those things as quickly as possible. So consider that, how you're going to work through that, whether you're going to do a sub function or do you have to do pages and call the page number in your URL string. Inconsistency, we obviously have a bit of an apples to oranges feel when you have one endpoint that's giving you counts of activity, whereas another one's just giving you the date of the last activity. So that can be a challenge. Token authentication, always a little bit of a different challenge. And then having to have a little bit of M or Power Query knowledge to be able to do that. And then, of course, documentation or, bad documentation. Actually, everything here for Microsoft Learn has been really good around these endpoints. So that makes life a lot easier for you. But because that doesn't always end up being the same for every API endpoint or every API library out there. So that's something you have to think about a little bit when you're looking at APIs and ingesting that into Fabric. So some resources here. The resource on the left there is a full end-to-end of everything that we've done in detail, code samples, templates, notebooks, all that stuff is available for you here. So on the left-hand side, you can use that. You can use the bit.ly link below, or you can use the QR code, and I'll upload this deck so you have it so you can look at it later. On the right-hand side, if you are just starting your Power Query journey, you have some questions and stuff like that. Obviously, my article will help you get through this, but if you want to learn a little bit more, I have a book that I really like, obviously, because I wrote it, but there are others that are really great. Gil Raviv has one. Miguel Escobar and Ken Poles has a really great book. So there's tons of resources out there. Whether you use my book or use somebody else's book, I really could care less. What's really important is take some time and learn a little bit about Power Query because that could save you a lot of grief in the future. So makes your queries a little bit more efficient and allows you to get through your refreshes a little easier. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pause and open the floor for any questions that are out there. So I pulled up the chat here so I could see that. Thank you for the reaction. I do appreciate that. Any questions? Anything I didn't answer or anything we need to dive a little deeper into?
Okay, I don't see a question at this time, but let's give a few more minutes to people. It was a great session, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, if we don't have any new questions, so I want to thank our speaker for today, Dominick. It's a great session, and I'm sure that everyone got something new from it. We will publish the recording, as I mentioned on the chat. It might take a few days, several days. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes a bit more than a week. I still need to publish the last meeting. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I remind you to register to the next meeting next week. And don't forget to register to the Future Data Driven Summit, which is our annual conference. And registration is open. All the links you can find in our website. I gave you the links, the main links that you need to remember on the chat. And thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks a lot, Dominick.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye for now. I will close the meeting.